The female reproductive system includes the ovaries, oviducts, uterus, cervix, vagina, and the external genitalia located in the pelvic region. Along with a pair of mammary glands, it supports the process of ovulation, fertilization, pregnancy, childbirth, and childcare. Let us study each organ in detail. The female reproductive system includes a pair of ovaries located one on each side of the lower abdomen. They are the primary sex organs as they produce the ovum or the female gamete. Each ovary is about 2 to 4 centimeters in length. They are connected to the pelvic wall and the uterus by ligaments called mesovarium. Each ovary is covered by an outer thin layer called the germinal epithelium. The germinal epithelium encloses the ovarian stroma, which is further divided into the outer cortex and the inner medulla. The cortex consists of many ovarian follicles in different stages of development. The ovarian follicle is the basic unit of the female reproductive system and is composed of roughly spherical aggregations of cells found in the ovary. The accessory ducts of the female reproductive system are the vagina, oviducts, and the uterus. The pair of oviducts or fallopian tubes is about 10 to 12 centimeters long and extends from the periphery of each ovary to the uterus. Each oviduct is differentiated into 3 parts, namely the infundibulum, ampulla, and isthmus. The infundibulum is a dilated funnel close to the ovary, and its edges are surrounded by finger-like projections called the fimbriae. They help collect and push the ovum into the oviduct after ovulation. The ampulla is the swollen and curved part behind the infundibulum. The fertilization of the ovum takes place in this part. The isthmus is a narrow and straight cavity, and it joins the uterus. The uterus is a hollow, pear-shaped muscular organ and is highly distensible. It is situated in the pelvic cavity between the urinary bladder and the rectum. It is also known as the womb. It is supported by ligaments attached to the pelvic wall known as mesometrium. The uterus opens into the vagina through a narrow cervix. The cavity of the cervix is called the cervical canal, which, along with the vagina, forms the birth canal. The wall of the uterus is composed of 3 layers of tissues. The outer thin membranous layer is called the perimetrium. The middle thick layer of smooth muscle is called the myometrium, and it helps during delivery by producing strong contraction motions. The inner glandular layer is called the endometrium, and it undergoes cyclical changes during the menstrual cycle. The vagina is a muscular tube starting from the lower end of the uterus up to the outside. The opening of the vagina in young females is partially covered by a thin membrane called the hymen. The hymen is frequently ruptured in childhood due to strenuous physical exercise. The female external genitalia includes the mons pubis, labia majora, labia minora, and the clitoris. The labia majora consists of fleshy folds of tissue that extends down from the mons pubis and surrounds the vaginal opening. Hidden under the labia majora is the labia minora. Towards its upper end lies the clitoris, a small finger-like structure, and below it is the urethral opening. The female reproductive system is supported by the mammary glands. The mammary glands or breasts are modified sweat glands that lie over the pectoral muscles. They contain glandular tissues and a variable amount of fat. Internally, each breast is divided into 15 to 20 mammary lobes containing clusters of cells called the alveoli. The alveoli open into the mammary tubules. The tubules of each lobe join to form the mammary duct. Several ducts join to form a wider ampulla, which is connected to the lactiferous duct. The lactiferous duct opens out through the nipple from which milk is sucked out. There are 3 phases in the life of a living organism: juvenile, reproductive, and senescence. During the reproductive phase, organisms give birth to offspring. Interestingly, most organisms display certain morphological and physiological changes during the reproductive phase. Human females, for instance, experience the menstrual cycle, which is defined as cyclical changes in the genital system during the reproductive phase. Incidentally, a woman experiences her first menstrual cycle, called the menarche, at the onset of puberty, usually between the ages of 9 and 12. Occurring approximately every 28 days, a single menstrual cycle consists of 4 phases: menstrual phase, follicular or proliferative phase, ovulatory phase, and lastly, the luteal or secretory phase. Each phase of the menstrual cycle is marked by simultaneous changes in the uterus, ovary, and the secretion of hormones. For instance, during the menstrual phase, the endometrial lining of the uterus and its blood vessels break down and mix with blood, mucus, and other cell debris to form menses. The menses are discharged through the vagina as menstruation or menstrual flow, which lasts for 3 to 5 days from the beginning of the menstrual cycle. Interestingly, the absence of menstruation indicates pregnancy or ovarian disorders such as polycystic ovarian disorder, or even factors such as stress and ill health. The menstrual phase is followed by the follicular phase, which occurs between days 6 and 14 of the menstrual cycle. During this phase, the primary follicle in the ovary matures into a Graafian follicle. Simultaneously, the endometrium undergoes proliferation, a process of regeneration which results in the formation of a new, thick endometrium. The follicular phase is followed by the ovulatory phase, which occurs during the middle of each menstrual cycle. During this phase, the Graafian follicle ruptures to release an ovum or egg cell into the pelvic cavity in a process called ovulation. The ovulatory phase is succeeded by the luteal or secretory phase, the last phase of the menstrual cycle, which occurs between days 16 and 28 of the menstrual cycle. This phase sees the transformation of the remaining Graafian follicle into a yellow mass called the corpus luteum. The endometrium too thickens, and its blood vessels become coiled and enlarged. Interestingly, the endometrium and corpus luteum play a vital role during the early stages of conception. For instance, a fertilized egg gets embedded in the endometrium and derives nourishment from it. The corpus luteum, on the other hand, starts secreting progesterone that helps maintain the endometrium and encourages the growth of the developing embryo. Conversely, in the absence of fertilization, the corpus luteum degenerates and triggers the breakdown of the endometrium. This marks the start of menstruation and the beginning of a new menstrual cycle. Did you know that the phases of the menstrual cycle are controlled by the interplay of different hormones secreted by the ovary and the pituitary gland? At the onset of menses, the anterior pituitary gland increases the secretion of the two gonadotropic hormones, luteinizing hormone or LH and follicle-stimulating hormone or FSH that simulate the development of primary follicles. However, the amount of estrogen and progesterone released by the ovary during this time is less, which causes the thinning of the endometrium. The release of LH and FSH keeps increasing, and during the follicular stage, these two hormones stimulate the maturation of the primary follicle into the Graafian follicle. Moreover, LH and FSH stimulate the maturing follicles to release estrogen, a hormone that helps in the proliferation of the endometrium. The increased levels of estrogen, in turn, cause the anterior pituitary gland to release a surge of LH and FSH, so much so that by the ovulation stage, the levels of FSH and LH in the blood are at their peak. This LH surge causes ovulation by rupturing the Graafian follicle and turning the follicle's remnants into the corpus luteum. The estrogen level in the body too reaches its peak, and we see a gradual thickening of the endometrium. However, once the corpus luteum begins secreting large amounts of progesterone, an FSH and LH inhibiting hormone, the levels of both these hormones drop, which in turn also lowers the levels of estrogen in the body. However, the endometrium continues to thicken because of an increase in the level of progesterone. Incidentally, the corpus luteum will keep secreting progesterone if a fertilized egg gets embedded in the endometrium. However, in the absence of a fertilized egg, the corpus luteum stops releasing progesterone and degenerates. A drop in the level of progesterone, in turn, triggers menstruation as well as the restart of the release of LH and FSH by the pituitary gland. Menstrual cycles normally stop once a woman reaches her 50s. This phase is called menopause. The menstrual cycle is an important process in a woman's body, and it consists of 4 phases which are controlled by hormones released by the ovary and the pituitary gland. Fertilization or fusion of gametes is the most vital event in the process of sexual reproduction, as it results in new life. In humans, while the male gamete or sperm is motile, the female gamete or ovum is non-motile.